Hello, Facebook Live. I'm going to wait until some more people hop on here before I start going through some of these notes here, just to see if anybody is around on this lunch hour today, and also to make sure that we have a connection and that people can hear me. So if you can hear me, just say so in the comments so I know that I'm not just talking to myself right here. I'm sitting in our car next to photographer Travis at the moment. He's been running the camera in the courtroom. We have had access to that, which has been great for the court to allow us to do that. We have restrictions on what we can and can't record, but hopefully we will be able to bring you some of that video in our newscasts tonight. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be very similar for those of you who followed or may have seen some of the Facebook Lives that we did during the Brent Christensen trial. I'm gonna do some of that, not to the same scale, because I think the access to public information in this case has been a lot broader than that was. There were some bombshells that came out in that trial right away, and I don't even want to compare the two of them. The only thing I'm comparing is the way that I'm going to present the information here. I've been taking notes all morning, so I have what's in here much more than I have time to type up right now. So I'm just going to kind of give you an example of some of the things that I've been seeing in court. So Michael Henslick, of course, charged with murdering Holly Cassano back in 2009. Investigators worked this case for a decade, almost a decade, without arresting any suspects. And then Henslick was finally tied to the case via DNA evidence after he discarded the cigarette butt, and they tested it, and it matched the DNA that they found at the crime scene. So what I'm going to go through is kind of how today went. Today we had opening statements. Julia Reitz and Troy Lozar are the prosecutors in this case, and so far Lindsay Yanchus has been taking the lead on the side of the public defender representing Michael Henslick. So Reitz made her opening statement today. The jury was sworn in. She says that she is going to prove that he not only did Michael Henslick kill Holly Cassano, but he did it in a way that was cruel and with wanton cruelty was the phrase that she used. She says what happened the night that she died. She was working her shift at Meijer. She got off. She went home. At some point, Henslick went over there seeking comfort. Eventually, she fell asleep in her bed in the bedroom. He fell asleep on the couch. He woke up, went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and stabbed her to death multiple times. That was what State's Attorney Julia Reitz says happened. She says that's the story of it, and she says that we meaning the jury and the audience in the courtroom, is going to hear a video of Henslick confessing to all of this when investigators arrested him after they tied him to the case via the DNA evidence. So we haven't gotten that far in the actual presentation of things yet, but that's what we're expected to hear. So the opening statement from the defense team, Lindsay Yanchus, was quite different. She said, yeah, Holly Cassano died, but Michael Henslick did not kill her. So they are claiming that their client is totally innocent of this. They claim that the state is presenting it as a simple case. That is actually not that simple. So they asked the jury to pay attention to the leads that weren't followed, pay attention to other things. And they said, well, there is a video of Michael Henslick saying something that sounds like a confession. His defense team is saying the jury cannot weigh that into consideration that strongly because they say the investigators at the time who were interrogating him were coercing him and physically backed him into a corner and getting physically aggressive. That's what their argument here is hinging on. So they say that the jury needs to weigh that with appropriate skepticism. So those were the opening statements. The defense's opening statement was only a couple minutes long, significantly shorter than State's Attorney Julia Reitz's. So they started calling witnesses. The state called one of Holly's friends and her cousin as well. Amber, and I'm not sure, it's on our web article. I don't want to butcher the pronunciation of her last name. I think it's Nakashian. She is also a friend of Michael Henslick, or she was anyway. Said that they knew each other, and she had moved up to Chicago when she found out that Holly died. She was driving. She was on her way back down to Mahomet when she got a text from Michael Henslick saying, sorry to hear about what happened. And the two of them discussed the way that it happened. Henslick says, I heard that she was beaten to death, and Amber corrected her and said, no, actually she was stabbed. Amber ended up talking to investigators, but she didn't think anything of her interaction with Henslick at the time. So she didn't mention that to them. She was cross-examined by the defense, just to confirm that she actually was kind of flirtatious with Michael Henslick back in the day, but she confirmed nothing other came of it. So they didn't end up actually hooking up or getting together in a relationship sense, however you want to figure that. The state called their next witness, Oscar Nuku. He works for Meyer. He was one of Holly's coworkers back in 2009 when she worked there. Mentioned that on November 1st, 2009, the last night that Holly was seen alive, he did see her at work there. They briefly discussed whether they had any plans later that night. Are you doing anything later tonight? She asked him. He said no. He says that he went home eventually at the end of the night. He checked his phone around 11 p.m. He had a missed text from Holly that he saw when he woke up that just said, hey. So that was the last communication that he ever heard from her. Then he learned of her death the next day. Excuse me. Then when investigators came to talk to him, he volunteered to give them a DNA swab from his cheek. So that was that witness. Then Julia Reitz called Blake Sales, I think it is. If I'm saying that wrong, it's correct on our web article. Again, I'm just reading off of my notes here, which are it's chicken scratch to the best of my ability. She used to work at Meyer also at the same time as Holly. She says November 1st, 2009, she was baking cookies, and she brought those into work and then shared them with Holly, I guess when Holly had a break in front of the customer service desk now. And she had also heard about what happened the next morning and talked to the investigators after Holly was found dead. The next witness that the state called was Toni Cassano, Holly's mother. She testified in a lot of this you've likely heard before if you've been following the case. She testified that Holly had just turned 22 the week before, and the next day, November 2nd, 2009, Holly was to go over to Tony's house for something at 9 a.m. So the next morning when Holly didn't show up, she tried to call her, couldn't get through, so eventually Tony just went over to her house, which is on DuPage Street in Candlewood Estates Mobile Home Park there in Mahomet. She parked her car, went into the mobile home. She saw when she opened the door, there were things on the ground. It looked like there were puddles of blood, but she assumed that Holly had just had a Halloween party and thought it was fake blood from that. So she's calling Holly's name, walking through the mobile home, and then she gets to the back bedroom and then sees Holly lying on the ground. She'd been stabbed. Tony goes over there and says she put her hand on her leg, says it felt cold, says she prayed to God, and then went outside and called 911. And the jury was shown pictures of Holly's body laying there, a lot of things that are not easy to look at, which I doubt that we will be sharing those images if we I doubt we'll be sharing those images, but you get the idea. Holly was lying naked on the floor, stab wounds, clothes ripped off, tattered, which Tony testified said she thought it looked like somebody had ripped them off. So she goes out to the porch of the mobile home and calls 911. Next witness that is called is, she's actually she's cross-examined by the defense just to ask her, did you have any idea who Michael Henslick was? To which she said, no, I had no idea who he was at the time. Never crossed her mind. Reitz now calls the responding Champaign County Sheriff's Office deputy who went out there after Tony called 911. He says he went in the house, tiptoed around just to try to make sure he didn't disturb the scene there, saw the same thing that Tony says she did, got on the radio with the supervisors. He goes back outside. By that time, the medics have arrived. Still have a couple firefighters from the Corn Belt Fire Department. He tells the firefighters they're not needed. The medics go back there. He escorts him back there. They do a check to see if Holly's alive. She was not. So they confirmed that she was dead. So at that point, he escorted them back out, and then crime scene investigators began to come to the scene. So at this point, State's Attorney Julia Reitz has just called a retired state police crime scene investigator to the stand. They just had him go through and confirm that he recognized a bunch of exhibits. They're pictures of the mobile home and the autopsy, Holly Cassano's autopsy. So we are expected to hear his testimony when we go back in there. We're going to start back up at 1:15. So that is where we are at so far. Stay with us, posting updates on WCIA.com, and I'm going to try to tweet stuff out every time that we have a recess. But other than that, that is where we are at so far in the trial. Henslick is sitting in there. He's been taking notes. He hasn't been very reactive to much of the stuff that was said. He's just sitting there with his attorneys. A lot of his family members are present as well. And a lot of Tony Cassano and a lot of Holly's family and friends are here as well. Everybody in the audience kind of looks solemn. The jurors seem like they're just taking everything all in. So that is everything that I can tell you so far. We will give you an update when we have more. Thanks for watching, everyone.